Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is information@cuandreview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 7th of January 2026 from the Voices section. How Scotland helped Great Britain keep the power on in 2025. This article is by Vicky Allen. In recent days, it has been widely trumpeted that renewable energy produced a record amount of electricity in Great Britain in 2025. Where, though, is the mention of where it is coming from? It seems to me time to blow our own trumpet. According to BBC analysis of provisional figures from the National Energy System Operator, NESO, N-E-S-O, wind was the biggest single source of electricity. It generated nearly 30% of Great Britain's electricity last year, up slightly on 2024. But there was also a significant rise in solar, which generated 6%, and gas was still responsible for 27%. Much of that wind energy is from Scotland, which continues, as ever, a strong part in tackling climate change and bringing down UK greenhouse gas emissions. Over 2/3 of the UK's onshore wind capacity is in Scotland, and just under a fifth of current offshore wind capacity. But before I move on to bigging up our hard work, a quick, more sobering note. All of this sounds like fantastic news, except that behind these figures is the fact that efforts to decarbonise the grid effectively stalled last year. Analysis by Carbon Brief, for instance, showed that though the fleet of wind, solar and biomass power plants all set new records in 2025, but electricity from gas still went up. There are a number of reasons for this. UK coal generation ended in late 2025, and nuclear power hit its lowest level in half a century. In addition, the Carbon Brief article says, there was a 1% rise in UK electricity demand after years of decline, as electric vehicles, heat pumps and data centres connected to the grid in greater numbers. We are now at a turning point where it appears that the electrification is properly coming online, and the result overall, according to Carbon Brief, is that UK electricity became slightly more polluting in 2025. And this is all, by the way, occurring against a backdrop of climate change in which the Met Office predicted last month that 2025 would be the UK's hottest year on record, in which global carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel combustion are projected to reach a record 38.1 billion metric tonnes, and increasingly experts are saying that keeping within a 1.5 degrees centigrade goal is implausible. It is occurring in a world in which renewables, alongside energy efficiency improvements, have been the most important drivers in reducing emissions. But back to Scotland's contribution. We can, of course, celebrate the efforts and progress made. The Scottish Government has not yet published renewable energy generation data for all of 2025, but we know that the third quarter saw the most renewable electricity generated in the third quarter of any year. Scotland is also exporting a great deal of it, with 2024, 21.0 terawatts going south and just 1.3 terawatts imported. Also, if we look at the data NESO published on monthly operational metered wind output in 2025, we see Scotland heavy lifting, producing nearly 55% of output for Britain, with only 8% of the population. Well done, but this contribution doesn't come without some associated negatives. There is, for instance, the question, raised increasingly frequently, of the impact of renewables infrastructure on Scotland's landscape and environment, and of whether jobs and reduced bills are coming to areas with renewables infrastructure. There is also the issue of curtailment due to inadequate grid development. In the first half of 2025, Scottish wind farms were paid not to produce 37% of their planned output, accounting for 86% of the total 4.6 terawatt hours of electricity curtailed across Britain. Not only is this costly, but a waste. Whether you choose to celebrate Scotland's significant contribution to grid decarbonisation depends on your point of view on climate change and other environmental impacts, your political ideology, and possibly also your location. I mostly choose to celebrate. That said, there are complexities here worth mentioning. One criticism is that Scotland already produces, through onshore wind alone, more than it needs, and enough for its forecast demand even out to 2050. When I delved into the figures earlier this year, I found that currently Scotland has an onshore wind capacity of 10 gigawatts and a gross peak demand of 4 gigawatts. So yes, we are producing far more than our needs. But looking ahead, I also saw that NESO, in its 10-year statement, estimates gross peak demand for Scotland in 2050 at between 8.5 gigawatts and 11 gigawatts, depending on what degree of electrification takes place. We might imagine that we are almost already there. However, in a renewables-centred system where generation is intermittent, capacity needs to be significantly higher than peak demand. There is also, in any case, the rest of Britain, and NESO has also said Scotland will be expected to export power into the rest of Great Britain most of the time. What's clear is that much of the generation being built here is not for the population of Scotland. We are gearing up for sending further electricity south of the border, and as exports elsewhere for green hydrogen production, and also, it seems, energy-guzzling data centres. A growth-based paradigm lies at the heart of this. Electricity, so the story goes, will fuel growth, and also, once generation and grid infrastructure are built, delivered by a market-driven system, the demand will come. Maybe it will be data centres. Meanwhile, one of the most unknowable and contentious areas for increased demand are those data centres. In its annual Future Energy Scenarios forecast, NESO said that energy use from these centres, which are set to surge due to growth in AI, could lead to a demand ranging vastly from 30 terawatt hours to 71 terawatt hours by 2050. The UK government, meanwhile, has been pushing for a rapid increase in deployments, with as much as 20% of demand possibly located in Scotland, helping to reduce network constraints. So, looking ahead to 2026, what can we predict? Certainly more Scottish renewables generation, more records broken, more backlash over onshore wind, more criticisms of curtailment, more worries about offshore wind supply chains and costs, and a rising questioning of the data centre gold rush in Scotland. but also, I hope, a remembering of how important clean energy is in fighting climate change and of the why of all this. And all in an election year. Strap in for a gusty ride. That article was by Vicky Allen. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 7th of January 2026 from the business section. Aberdeenshire farmers praised as efforts to clear snow continue. This article is by Josh Pizzuto-Pomako. Aberdeenshire farmers have been praised for helping to dig out rural communities amid a week-long winter storm. More than 100 local contractors have been hard at work in recent days, clearing snow from roads and essential car parks. Others have cleared snow at care homes and emergency facilities to allow staff to access the sites. One local resident posted on social media, "A wee shout out to my dad and brother who cleared our street in Turriff tonight and have been busy helping out around the local area over the past few days with blocked roads and stuck cars. Really grateful for everything they're doing to help folk get moving again. If anyone needs their street cleared, feel free to get in contact with them to see if they're able to help out." Another resident shared a video of a tractor clearing a snow-covered road near the coast, writing, "Two heroes from the Ellen area, clearing the coast road between Newborough and Cruden Bay. Well done, guys." Similarly, Gordon and Buchan MP Harriet Cross paid tribute to the hard work of local farmers. She said, "Our heroic farmers have gone above and beyond to help stranded travellers to navigate through the treacherous conditions. Their work has been courageous in the face of extremely dangerous snowstorms, and I can't praise them enough." She added, "A huge thank you must also go to numerous council workers, carers, emergency services and neighbours who have rallied together to keep communities functioning during these challenging conditions. Our rural communities always come together in difficult times like this, and I'm extremely grateful to all those who helped during the heavy snow showers." Police Scotland echoed these sentiments, writing on Facebook, "There has been so much fantastic community spirit across the Northeast, with people coming together to help one another. A huge thank you to everyone lending a hand, and a gentle reminder to please stay safe while helping others, following all published guidance and advice." The tributes came as Aberdeenshire Council declared a major incident on Tuesday afternoon. A statement read, "We are looking at a prolonged period of significant impacts, and as of today, Aberdeenshire Council has declared a major incident. Aberdeenshire will continue to experience heavy snowfall today and overnight, some of which will fall as icy rain, which has the potential to cause further disruption. We appreciate that this is a very challenging time for many of you, and particularly those living in our most rural locations and smaller settlements, and our teams are working to support individuals who are struggling." That article was by Josh Pizzuto-Pomako. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 7th of January 2026 from the business section. Business rates rise at Holyrood could cripple licensed premises. This article is by Josh Pizzuto-Pomako. A hospitality body has called for a rethink on planned business rates increases in the upcoming Scottish budget. The Scottish Hospitality Group says that the government's recent revaluation of non-domestic rates is totally disconnected from the trading reality and could force many small businesses to close. The Scottish Government sets the commercial property tax every 3 years, while councils administer and collect the levy. Stephen Montgomery, the group's director, said that decisions taken in the budget due to be published on the 13th of January would determine the future of licensed hospitality. He added, the business rates revaluation is a hammer blow, with some licensed hospitality businesses facing brutal increases of over 550%. A ridiculous taxation increase on theoretical valuations that bear no relation to actual profits or indeed the ability to pay. For many operators, the figures simply do not stack up, and the new bills would be the final nail in the coffin. The organisation has also called on the government to extend the small business bonus scheme to ensure that licensed premises would benefit from the programme. The scheme provides up to 100% in rates relief if the combined rateable value of all business premises is £35,000 or less. The rateable values of individual premises are £20,000 or less, and the property is actively occupied. Montgomery says the current structure is unfairly stacked against bars and restaurants. He remarked, on one high street examined, bars and restaurants, often employing far more people and trading longer hours, are the only businesses paying rates. Professional services next door all fall under the small business bonus scheme. This is not fairness. It is a structural imbalance, leaving licensed premises picking up the bill for all local services. We are asking the Scottish Government to use the Scottish budget to deliver urgent action, including meaningful rates relief targeted for licensed hospitality, the business boss went on to say. We support a commitment to affordability and ability to pay as core principles of the non-domestic rate system. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, the valuation of all non-domestic property is a matter for the Scottish assessors who are independent of central and local government. That article was by Josh Pizzuto-Pomako.
This is from the Herald on Thursday, 8th January 2026, from the News section. Visible escalation of works to renovate Glasgow's George Square. By Craig Williams. A new phase in the restoration of George Square will kick off a big year in the continuing transformation of Glasgow city centre. Work on extending the look and feel of the new George Square to surrounding roads begins this week, with significant changes in the city centre emerging in the months ahead. The first half of the year will see the majority of the £123 million Avenues programme completed, including the section of Argyle Street from Kingston Bridge to Central Station. The biggest city centre upgrade since the pedestrianisation of Buchanan Street in the 1970s, the avenues are already complementing new commercial and residential developments, either recently completed or under construction. With the redevelopment of George Square now halfway towards its August completion, work starts on Monday on the installation of the new granite surfaces on the road along the north side of the square. Essential for the wall-to-wall transformation of the square, this phase means the road between Queen Street and North Frederick Street will be closed to traffic for 3 months. Work is then scheduled to begin on the road on the south of the square in April. Meanwhile, with the footways outside the city chambers and then along to Queen Street Station having been completed over the festive period, the work to transform the pavement area on the western side of George Square is expected to conclude by February. And within the square itself, the reconstruction of the statue plinths in their new positions has concluded, while the specialist restoration of the statues, including the Sir Walter Scott monument, continues. Preparatory works undertaken to date will also allow granite paving, landscaping and tree planting to commence at pace inside the hoarding during the spring. Councillor Angus Miller, convener for the city centre recovery at Glasgow City Council, said, "This is the year when the Glaswegians are going to see major changes to the city centre and the emergence of the international quality public spaces they deserve." By summer, 10 of the 16 avenues making up the programme will have been completed, including several key routes into town and the western section of Argyle Street. Take a walk to the most recently completed avenues around Pitt Street and Holland Street, and you'll already see how they're creating a more European-style environment. That's more attractive to residents and visitors, but also creates much better conditions for the investment which is coming into the city. And crucially, we are now only 8 months from the completion of the new George Square, with visible escalation of works getting underway on Monday. Glaswegians can already get a taster of the look and quality of what's to come with the new granite footways along the north, east and west of the square, which are already open to the public. The last remaining sections of the Argyle Street West Avenue are expected to be finished in March, while Duke Street and John Knox Street Avenues alongside the Cowcaddens Road and Doby's Loan projects are due for completion in April. The South Portland Street Avenue is scheduled to be completed in the following month. The North Hanover and Kyle Street Avenues are due for completion this November, while work on the avenues covering the eastern section of Argyle Street, as well as High Street, Stockwell Street and George Street, is scheduled to get underway by the end of this year. Councillor Miller added, "Creating the city centre for the next century will inevitably involve a level of disruption, and contractors and council staff will continue to engage with businesses and residents where they may be affected. But as this year progresses and that transformation becomes clear, I'm sure our citizens will agree it'll have been worth it." The George Square project is part of the wider £123 million Avenues programme, which is funded through the Glasgow City Region City Deal, with the funding provided by the Scottish and UK governments. That article was by Craig Williams.
From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 8th of January 2026, from the sports section. I started Celtic job rumour myself, as I would love certain role. Article written by Blair Meikle. Martin O'Neill has admitted he would love a job up the stairs at Celtic after being linked with replacing Peter Lawwell as chairman. The 73-year-old is back in position as interim manager at the club after Wilfried Nancy's sacking, with the Northern Irishman having won 7 of his 8 games in charge during his earlier stint before the Frenchman's appointment. Longer term, he has been suggested as taking up Lawwell's position after he resigned at the tail end of last year. O'Neill has joked he started that rumour himself and admits he has always thought he would love a job as a director of football or something of that ilk. He said, "I put that out myself. I'd like to be owner. I've always said there were 2 jobs that I always wanted. I wanted to be assistant to Sir Alex Ferguson because that's the job of the century. You don't have any responsibility. He'll take it all and you'll be in a job for life. The other job was to be a director of football at any club. I get to sign the players and the manager takes the blame. You're still in a job when the manager goes, which has been apparent the other day with Manchester United. The minute a manager, who used to have power in the 70s, 80s or 90s, publicly is against a director of football, you're out. That's the job I want." O'Neill has also opened up on cancelling his Sky TV duties for the derby against Rangers when Nancy was still in charge and under pressure. "I didn't think it was appropriate," he said. "I was down to do Sky TV for the Rangers game, but I didn't think it was appropriate. If the team had been winning games, then fine, absolutely fine, but that's all. You don't want to be scurrying around in the stand. I've seen it before when I was a manager, and there were boys in the stands, managers who were out of a job, staring down. I didn't like it." That article was written by Blair Meikle and recorded by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 8th of January 2026, from the sports section. Steve Clarke in America to suss Scotland's World Cup base. Article written by Stephen McGowan. Scotland manager Steve Clarke has phoned to America to run the eye over more potential World Cup training bases. FIFA have asked participating nations to list their preferred base camps for the next summer's finals with a deadline of January 15th. A list of brochures for options in host cities and beyond were allocated to the Scottish FA, with the governing body keen to secure suitable accommodation and training facilities close to Boston, where they face Haiti and Morocco in their opening Group C games. With concerns raised over the options on the table, FIFA has now given nations the chance to pick an HQ as they see fit. And Clarke is now in America with assistant manager Stephen Naismith, checking out facilities in the Boston, New York and Charlotte, North Carolina. Scotland play their first two group games against Haiti and Morocco in the Gillette Stadium, Boston, and Brazil in Miami, Florida. A 26-man squad will assemble at the end of May for a mini-camp in Scotland before intensive preparations get underway in Florida. Due to arrive at their tournament HQ by June the 8th, the Boston area is the preferred base camp, while North Carolina would offer equidistant travel between the two match venues. The SFA are putting the finishing touches to play the Ivory Coast and Japan in March before a send-off game against Curacao at Hampden in June. The final preparation match would come against Peru in the United States. Article written by Stephen McGowan.
This letter is also from the Herald on Thursday the 8th of January 2026. It is found in the Voices section and the headline is Don't Blame Sir Keir. I am still horrified at the thought that Americans voted for Donald Trump as their president. Each day when I read the Herald, I find that my reaction is truly justified. His attacks on Venezuela and his threats towards Greenland, also remembering what he said about Canada, are indefensible. Denmark's Prime Minister warns US takeover of Greenland would mark end of NATO military alliance, the Herald, January 7. However, as I reach your letters page, I am both bemused and puzzled as to how many of your contributors somehow seek to convert me to supporting independence, and even worse, voting SNP in the forthcoming election. I fail to understand how some people manage to put all the blame on Sir Keir, which is then often accompanied by an unflattering portrayal of him. It seems to me that such irrelevance not only sets a trap for many who are inclined to vote for Scottish Labour, but is meant to discourage them from making a choice on the real issues. The attempt to smear Sir Keir for not publicly denouncing President Trump because of the matters mentioned above is shoddy and ridiculous. Like many who have written recently, I stand by the views I hold, but neither the readers entangled in a tissue of self-indulgence nor I happen to be Prime Minister. No doubt Sir Keir has his own views on Mr Trump's actions, but the PM must also be aware of Mr Trump's character, so to seek headlines by attacking the President publicly would be an act of sheer folly. The PM's conduct on foreign affairs is important, and we must understand the diplomacy he has shown. Responding to Mr Trump's tariffs, for example, he saved hundreds of thousands of jobs, not least in Scotland. As Herald readers must know, Mr Swinney got the message regarding diplomacy. Despite foolish comments during the American election, he was later eager to be seen with Mr Trump, complete with an army of tax-funded media representatives, as he outshone even Nicola Sturgeon, posing as a world statesman. If the SNP's record in government had the slightest merit, does anyone think that this would not be their main boast in an election, instead of searching in panic for whatever distraction can keep them in the costly jobs they occupy? When folk focus on what really matters, the case for removing the SNP becomes overwhelming. Mr Swinney's party has become stale and entitled. As the voters of Hamilton concluded, Despite all the pundits, it is time for a new and fresh administration led by Anas Sarwar. This surely would be a more positive outcome than the alternatives. Sir Tom Clarke, former Labour MP for Coatbridge. These letters are from the Herald on Thursday the 8th of January 2026. They are found in the Voices section, and the headline for the first letter is Angela Constance breached code, now Holyrood's in the dock. Angela Constance did breach the ministerial code. There is no excuse. She should have corrected the record much earlier than she did. Constance breached ministerial code twice, the Herald, January 7. This is Holyrood at its finest. Nothing to see here. Move on. What kind of Mickey Mouse Parliament do we have when ministers stay in post no matter what they do? Either the public should vote the SNP out of power, or perhaps the next referendum should not be about independence, but whether Holyrood should be dissolved. The tax-paying public, and even those on benefits, are not being well served by this failing system. Dr. Gerald Edwards, Glasgow. The second letter, bunker mentality with bids. The Angela Constance case and the finding that the minister failed to formally clarify matters with officials initially arguing that Parliament may not have been misinformed is a reminder of how quickly a bunker mentality can take hold. This defensiveness has until recently been all too apparent for small businesses dealing with business improvement districts' bids. For 2 years, those of us trying to highlight inequity in bid levies have struggled to get a meaningful response from the Scottish Government. Yet, at the back end of last year, a chink of light dawned. To explain, bid levies are meant to be proportionate. However, many local independents face rates that feel anything but, and reassurances that local authorities can veto and Scotland's improvement districts will ensure compliance have offered little comfort in practice. By contrast, government-endorsed guidance in England and Wales is widely understood to keep typical bid levies around 1 to 2%, with an expected upper limit of 4% linked to non-domestic rates. Scotland has no equivalent guidance, and small businesses here, with some of the highest bid levies in the UK, are paying the price. In September 2025, Kate Forbes said she had asked officials to raise the issue of levy levels and guidance with the government-funded organisation Scotland's Improvement Districts. We know the outcome in the Constance case. When will we hear the outcome of this ministerial request? Daphne Hamilton, Alloa. These letters are also from the Herald on Thursday the 8th of January 2026. They are found in the Voices section, and the headline for the opening letter is Sarwar looks desperate. Rebecca McCurdy's article, Holyrood Election Campaign is underway, but which leader survives the chaos, the Herald, January 6, was an interesting read, underlining the fact that the Holyrood election is not far away. As highlighted in the piece, both Labour and the Conservatives will need to pull a rabbit out of the hat if they are to avoid political oblivion, and that is not looking likely. Meanwhile, Miss Curdy had readers turn the page before any mention of Reform UK. Anas Sarwar attempted to introduce some Scottishness into his keynote address by displaying a saltire. This was completely farcical and only served to emphasise his desperation. Scotland and the voters know exactly where Mr Sarwar stands in Labour's pecking order when measured against Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour cabinet at Westminster. So, the only person Mr Sarwar is convincing of his Scottishness is himself. Katrina Clark, Banknock, Falkirk. Hobson's choice. The upcoming Holyrood election fills me with passionate ennui, if such a thing can exist. I hope my ballot box decision can help bring about an end to the SNP reign, but to be replaced by what? More hot air and ineffectual governance, I predict. Depressing indeed. Henry Waterhouse, Edinburgh. time for nationhood. Duncan Suman, Herald Letters, January 7, trots out the tired old unionist myth that independent Scotland would inevitably be a one-party state governed perpetually by the SNP. Where has it ever been suggested that this would be the case? The SNP would rapidly lose its appeal after independence, and under our Scottish electoral system, a coalition of some sort would be likely to emerge. The independence option is a choice for our sovereign Scottish nation and is not a party political matter which should require the consent of a government elected by our English neighbours. When will the people of Scotland wake up to the truth that we are not equal partners in a voluntary union of any kind? We have been a captive colony of England ever since Scotland was unceremoniously wiped off the international map when it was annexed by England, which adopted the name Great Britain in 1707. Roy Williamson of the Corries summed it up so well in the song Flower of Scotland. We can still rise and be a nation again. Willie MacLean Mulgai. That concludes the letters from the Herald on Thursday the 8th of January 2026.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 12th of January 2026, from the news section. Cyclist taken to hospital after crash closes road in Edinburgh, by Josh Pizzit-Sopamaco. A cyclist has been taken to hospital after being struck by a van in Edinburgh city centre on Monday. The northbound lane of Henderson Road in Edinburgh has been closed for several hours following the incident. A cordon has been put into place at the bottom of Dundas Street at its junction with Henderson Row and Eyre Place. Police have urged the public to avoid the area. A statement from Police Scotland read, Henderson Row in Edinburgh is closed northbound following a crash involving a van and a cyclist that happened around 11:45am on Monday the 12th of January. Emergency services attended and the cyclist has been taken to hospital. Road users are advised to avoid the area. That article was written by Josh Pizzit-Sopamaco. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 12th of January 2026, from the news section. Football fan jailed for striking player with chair thrown from stand. Report by Craig Williams. A football fan who struck one of his own players with a plastic seat thrown from a stand has been imprisoned for 18 months. David Gowans, 32, of Aberdeen, has also been banned from attending football matches for 10 years. The seat hit Aberdeen player Jack McKenzie above the left eye, leaving a 2-inch wound which required stitches. The incident happened on May 17 last year, following the final game of the season between Aberdeen and Dundee United at Tannadice. Gowans was sentenced at Dundee Sheriff Court after he admitted a charge of culpable and reckless conduct. Helen Nisbet, Procurator Fiscal for Tayside, Central and Fife, said, This was disgraceful conduct which could have resulted in far greater consequences. David Gowans' crass behaviour could also have jeopardised the safety of other supporters. As prosecutors, we will not hesitate to deal with this type of offending which puts people at serious risk of harm. At the time the seat was thrown, a number of Dundee United fans were on the pitch celebrating their team's victory, which guaranteed qualification for European competition. A witness saw Gowans, who identified as an Aberdeen ultra, throw the seat from an upper tier. Mr Mackenzie, who now plays for Plymouth Argyle, was among a group of Aberdeen players who went over to the nearside stand to applaud their own supporters. Stadium CCTV footage showed the player falling to the ground and holding his head. Hours later, Gowans contacted the Aberdeen supporters liaison and disability officer through WhatsApp, but initially denied throwing the seat. He wrote, I can't admit to something that would be extremely bad for me. There is no evidence of it. However, he later confessed and his details were passed to the police, who arrested him 2 days later. During a police interview, the accused admitted drinking a half-litre of vodka prior to leaving home for the match. That report was written by Craig Williams and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 12th of January 2026, from the news section. Man who tried to kill passenger on ScotRail train jailed for 12 years. Article written by Grant McCabe. A man guilty of trying to kill a train passenger in a horror bottle attack has been jailed for 12 years. Thomas Craig, 48, repeatedly stabbed Glenn Lennon with a smashed weapon on the Glasgow Queen Street to Perth service on February 16, 2024. The 23-year-old victim was struck near the heart, with his injuries including a collapsed lung and a severed artery. He also lost 40% of his blood. Mr. Lennon was set upon after Craig initially turned on the man's friend, Aaron Nelson, 22, on the train following a minor disagreement. Shocking footage, released by British Transport Police, showed a raging Craig leap from his seat armed with the glass bottle. Craig was today sentenced at the High Court in Glasgow. He had earlier been convicted of attempted murder and aggravated assault following a trial last month. Lord Arthurson told the attacker, "Your victims were complete strangers to you. You had, that day, taken alcohol for 6 hours and also cocaine. Footage of the crimes was played to the jury. In a background report for this case, you described yourself as a monster who was unrecognisable to you. You launched a violently appalling attack, terrifying them and all on board who witnessed what you did." The judge also today paid tribute to the other passengers who went to help the injured victims, including a nurse on board. Jurors heard how Craig had been drinking before he started speaking to fellow passengers on the train. He hurled an insult before suddenly leaving his seat and going for Mr. Nelson. Craig hit him over the head with the bottle as the victim then tried to escape down the carriage as other panicked travellers watched. But the attacker caught up and struck him again, causing weapons to smash. Mr. Lennon attempted to step in. He was then struck in the chest with the broken neck of the bottle. Painter and decorator Craig also snatched Mr. Lennon's mobile phone. The court heard how both men were left scarred for life. Craig, of Barhead, Renfrewshire, was caught on camera walking back down the train, and then he took off his blood-splattered jumper, replacing it with a clean hoodie. Police and paramedics met the train at Larbert Railway Station in Stirlingshire, where the victims were taken to hospital and Craig was arrested. Tony Graham KC, defending, today said, "There is essentially two Thomas Craigs. One who behaves in an inappropriate and criminal way, and one who is a contributor to those around him." The advocate added Craig had struggled to understand how he behaved that day, but is aware the attacks will likely continue to haunt the victims. Mr. Graham, he is a man who has seen his face on CCTV. He is a man who has seen what he has done. Craig had also written a letter for Lord Arthurson, which he did describe as impressive. He will also be supervised for a further 3 years on his release. That article was written by Grant McCabe. From the Herald, Monday the 12th of January 2026, from the news section. Officers investigating murder of Jordan Gray revisit scene, by Craig Williams. Officers investigating the murder of Jordan Gray in Motherwell have revisited the area 4 weeks on to speak to members of the public. The 26-year-old suffered fatal firearm injuries at his home in Shields Court on the night of Sunday, December 14th, 2025. His body was discovered the following day, and a murder investigation was launched. On Sunday, January 11, detectives from the Major Investigation Team and local uniformed officers conducted a high-visibility stop-and-talk operation to speak to members of the public who may have been in the area around the time of Jordan's murder. Around 120 people interacted with officers, Police Scotland said. Detective Superintendent Grant Hendry, Major Investigation Team, said, "We are investigating the murder of a young man in his own home. I understand that this is a concerning incident for people living in the area. I want to continue to reassure them that we have a dedicated team of specialist officers working on this, using all available resources to trace the person responsible and get answers for Jordan's family. While there's a lot happening behind the scenes, it's important that we keep a visible presence in the area. I'd like to thank residents for their continued support and patience as our inquiries progress. Information about who is responsible for Jordan's death may be known within the community. I want to again appeal to anyone who hasn't already spoken to police and knows or has heard anything to come forward. It doesn't matter how insignificant you feel that information is, or if you think we already know, I'm asking you to please report it. As well as ongoing forensic analysis, officers have gathered 1,200 hours of CCTV footage and conducted door-to-door inquiries, resulting in 250 questionnaires being completed and 88 letter drops seeking further information. Inquiries continue to identify a person seen on Shields Court around 10:35 p.m. on Sunday the 14th of December. They were wearing a dark jacket with the hood up and dark trousers. Anyone with information on this person is urged to contact the investigation team. Detective Superintendent Hendry continued, "This person may have vital information which could help us get answers for Jordan's family and trace the person responsible for his death. If you were in the area at the time and think that description matches you, please come forward. Even if it's just so we can eliminate you from our inquiries, we want to speak to you." That report was written by Craig Williams and read by Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 12th of January 2026, from the news section. Patients with these illnesses warned not to go to Glasgow's A&Es. Report by Josh Pizzuto-Pamako. 2/3 of people who self-presented at A&E last year could have been treated elsewhere, Scotland's largest health board has said. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, which serves more than 1.2 million people in the west of Scotland, has urged the public to make sure conditions require emergency treatment before attending A&E. The call comes as hospitals across Scotland are struggling to keep up with the pace of emergency admissions. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde said that the most common ailments for self-presenting patients in 2025 included ankle sprains, diarrhoea and viral infections. The figures, which were recorded between April and September, show that of 31,483 self-presenting individuals, 20,215, around 63%, had injuries or illnesses that did not require emergency care. Self-presenting is defined as appearing at A&E without consulting a GP or 111. Dr Claire Harrow, Deputy Medical Director for Acute Services at the board, said, "Every day, dozens of people are coming to A&E with conditions that could be managed safely and more quickly elsewhere. This not only means longer waits for them, but can also risk delays for those with life-threatening emergencies." Last week, the Herald reported that Crosshouse Hospital in Kilmarnock regularly exceeded capacity by as much as 50%, forcing patients into hallways as doctors and nurses battle to save lives. Conservative MSP Brian Whittle said that the situation was intolerable and cannot continue in frontline care. Now, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde has asked the public to consider their symptoms before driving to A&E. The health board said that people should consider if their illnesses or injuries can be treated from home and urged them to call NHS 24 on 111 for guidance if unsure about treatment steps. Dr Harrow said, "Unless you have a serious injury or your condition is life-threatening, A&E is not the best place to go. If you don't need to be there, you may be redirected elsewhere. There are quicker ways to access the care you need. These include treating from home using the NHS Inform website or NHS 24 online app, visiting your local pharmacy, booking a GP appointment or calling NHS 24 on 111. That article was written by Josh Pizzuto-Pamako and recorded by me, Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 12th of January 2026, from the news section. Plans lodged for new Co-op supermarket on Mull by Andrew Galloway. Plans have been lodged for a new Co-op supermarket to be built at an industrial estate in Tobermory. The proposed new store at the Ballasket estate would operate alongside the shopping chain's current store in the town in Main Street. But the report has said that the current store is not sufficiently large for the population it serves, as well as the aisles being narrow. APC Group Limited has now applied to Argyll and Bute Council for planning permission for new premises, which it says will provide a much more efficient and fit-for-purpose food store. The council is expected to rule on the application by early March, with the public now able to view the plans and submit feedback. A planning statement by North Planning and Development said, "The proposed Class 1A shop is to accommodate the Co-op, and this new and additional store will supplement the existing store at Main Street, Tobermory, which will remain in place and trading as a Co-op. The scale, nature and characteristics of the existing Co-op no longer best serve customers, and the store suffers from a variety of constraints, compromising the satisfaction of customers and impacting on the efficient operation of the store. The existing store is not sufficiently large to serve the catchment population as well as the Co-op would like, and the seasonal nature of the location can create particular issues with gaps on shelves and stock replenishment, etc. A new and larger store, with better storage, will allow the Co-op to provide a much more efficient and fit-for-purpose food store that can better serve and meet customer expectations. Aisles are narrow in the existing store, resulting in congestion within the store. Congestion around the checkouts and aisles can result in conflict between customers waiting to be served and those manoeuvring through these areas. Congestion within the store makes it difficult to manoeuvre stock trolleys and cases through the aisles and shelves to replenish stock. As a result, shelves are stacked at higher levels than normally found in other Co-op stores. There is insufficient floor space to display a sufficient quantity of some goods and insufficient floor space to offer customers the desired range of goods, and a new and additional store will allow an improved range and choice of product to be made available." The report added, "The Co-op wish to invest in Tobermory and the Isle of Mull through the development of a new Class 1A shop which better meets the expectations and demands of Co-op customers, and which will help to retain retail expenditure in Tobermory and on Mull, reduce the need for car-borne trips to stores in other locations, with consequent carbon reduction benefits, and serve to help protect and increase local employment within the new Co-op store. Whilst the existing Co-op store in Tobermory does not best meet all of the customer demands, it is recognised that the existing premises served an important purpose and role within the town centre, and the existing store at Main Street will therefore remain in place and trading as a Co-op alongside the new, additional and larger food store. To view plans and submit feedback, visit the Council's planning portal at argyll-bute.gov.uk. That's argyll-bute.gov.uk. Use the reference number 25/02099/PP. That article was written by Andrew Galloway.
From the Herald, Monday, 12th of January 2026. Sports section. Celtic star makes not proud admission over field spell. By Ryan McGinley, sports writer. Celtic's Arnie Engels has praised the return of Martin O'Neill, insisting that the Celtic legend's return has put his side in a good way once again. The Belgium international played the full 90 minutes for his side in their 4-0 defeat of Dundee United, as O'Neill's third stint as interim manager got off to the perfect start. After the game, Engels spoke about 73-year-old O'Neill's homecoming as he replaced Wilfred Nancy after the Frenchman's ill-fated 33 days in charge of the club. It's really strange for us. Obviously, there weren't the results that we were hoping for, but I think that is now behind us, he said. We're not proud of that, and we're still thinking about what we should have done better. But it's now up to us to just move on and go from here, because we showed that we have a really good squad with a lot of talent and that we can win games and not give the opposition any chance. Everybody has a lot of confidence now. I think it's really good that we just stick to the basics again and that we do what we're good at. Then you see everything follows. I think we never give them, Dundee United, any chance to come into the game, and we pressed them really well. On dealing with his side, sticky patch form-wise, Engels continued. Obviously, you speak about things that are going on in Celtic, but I mean, it is what it is, and we can't look back now. We just need to look forward. It's not nice for family and friends to see that we are losing. It's never a nice feeling, not for us, not for everybody, not for the fans. So obviously you're going to try and speak to me about what is going on. I think we're in a good way now again, and hopefully we can go and win lots of games. That article was by Ryan McGinley. From the Herald, Sunday the 11th of January 2026, Sports section. Danny Rowell proud of Rangers' performance in win over Aberdeen, by PA News Agency. Danny Rowell insists Rangers played men's football to beat managerless Aberdeen 2-0 for the second time this week. The Gers overcame interim boss Peter Levine's side 2-0 at Ibrox on Tuesday night, and they took a lead at Pittodrie in atrocious conditions, with midfielder Theo Assegaard followed in midway through the first half for his third goal in 5 games. Ibrox defender Emmanuel Fernandez had the ball in the Don's net in the 20th minute, only for the goal to be controversially chalked off for using his arm in the aerial duel with keeper Dimitar Mitov. But a James Taverner penalty in the 74th minute moved Rangers back to within 3 points of William Hill Premiership leaders' Hearts, having played a game more. Rowell said, big pride in my group. To come to a really tough place, we showed again different faces, which is what we need. We played good men's football. We were ready in the duels, second balls. We understood when we had the playing behind. Then we understand also to keep the ball in the right areas. The result was enjoyable, of course. It's great to see. Freely deserved from my point. We scored in the right moment. Then in the second half, we missed some good opportunities to make it 2-0 or even 3-0, and then finally won 2-0. We were really focused until the end, and it is outstanding what we've done so far. 5 wins in a row. Now we take a short break, make a serious Scottish Cup game against Annan, and then we have to go again. Before the game, the Ibrox club confirmed Danish midfielder Toshi Chukwuemeka's move from Sturm Graz on a 3.5-year contract. The 22-year-old is still waiting on international clearance and a work permit, but Rowell said, I'm very happy. I think we worked hard in the last couple of days to make this deal. Big thank you to the board, Andrew Kavanagh, our chairman. At the moment, the communication is great. Tochi will bring a good physical side, big experience also in Europe. But it's also very important to understand, we have also a group today on the pitch. They worked really hard. They also deserve a lot of credit. And this is exactly what we need. We need the challenge in some positions. But we also have to understand our development in the last 10 to 12 weeks. It's outstanding from some players. And again, look to Philo. He scored again, and he is the next one who goes in the right direction, and I was really pleased to see it. After 2 defeats out of 2, after taking over from the departed Jimmy Phelan, first-team coach Levine was candid about the Dons' form after 6 defeats in the last 7 matches. He said, yeah, it's not good enough, especially for a club this size, and what we want to achieve this season. There's some nice things I can pick out, but again, overall, it's just not good enough. But again, I can only do so much. They've got to step up as well. That article was by PA News Agency. From the Herald, Sunday the 11th of January 2026, Sports section. For 4 years, Raducanu has been an enigma. Will that change in 2026? By Susan Eaglestaff, sports writer. There are few British athletes whose careers have been quite as unpredictable and unfathomable as Emma Raducanu's. Her US Open victory in 2021 remains one of the greatest results in British sport and one of the most surprising in tennis's history. But since then, both her results and many of her career decisions have been underwhelming, to say the least. Her US Open win took her into the world's top 20, but the combination of injuries and poor form saw her drop outside the top 250 in the rankings. Perhaps the most poignant fact is that since the 23-year-old's Grand Slam victory, she's not won a single tournament. Of all the female tennis players, Raducanu is perhaps the most polarising on the planet. She has many ardent fans, but also a lot of detractors. Some of the criticism she attracts is unwarranted and undeserved. The battering she gets for having so many high-profile sponsors is over the top. If her global company is willing to throw millions of pounds at her, it's unsurprising that she takes it. And I'm not automatically a subscriber to the theory that all off-court activities are detrimental to on-court performances. But some of the criticism of Raducanu is justified. She's made some baffling decisions in the past 4 years since she broke onto the scene with her US Open win. Her willingness to hire coaches for sometimes as little as a matter of weeks before discarding them is just a bad way to try and forward one's career. And her insistence that she knows better than almost anyone else in the world when it comes to tennis is both naive and ignorant, and frankly, plain wrong. Some of her choices have hurt her career badly. Her reluctance until recently to hire a full-time fitness coach and the resultant lack of robustness in her body has ensured she has not ever enjoyed a season uninterrupted by injury issues. If an individual can't play week after week without their body breaking down, they're never going to become a truly world-class player, and that's exactly the predicament Raducanu found herself in. But there's now signs that the Brit may finally have worked out what is needed to become a consistent force within the women's game, and 2025 gave the strongest indication yet that Raducanu may at last have found her way in the sport. Her last 12 months have not been entirely uninterrupted by injury. That would of course be too much to ask, but she managed to maintain her fitness for longer spells than she's ever done previously since joining the tour full-time. In 2025, Raducanu played 22 tournaments and racked up a couple of top 10 wins. She did, however, fail to trouble the sharp end of the tournaments much, but still her consistency is turning out. It has to be considered a highlight. In Raducanu's position, you've got to take the positives where you can get them. The tail end of last year saw Raducanu hampered by a foot injury that's hung about into 2026. And certainly her start to this year with a 3-set defeat to former top 10 player Maria Stakara in the United Cup wasn't quite what she wanted. But this doesn't take away from the fact that she built a base last year that's as solid as she's ever had. This year is unequivocally pivotal for Raducanu. Sport waits for no one, and it's questionable if she can afford yet another underwhelming season. At 23, she's still young, but she's also frittered away at least a couple of years of her career, and there's little doubt she could have made more of a payback in terms of results and performances if she'd made better decisions. Sport is unforgiving, which Raducanu has found out to her cost, and another disappointing season this year would only add strength to the argument that she hit her peak at the US Open in 2021 and will never scale those heights again. And another thing, it was only a matter of time before a British athlete joined the Enhanced Games. For all the derision which, with the Enhanced Games otherwise known as the Olympics on steroids, has been met, it's certainly building some quite considerable momentum. The latest recruit is British sprinter Rhys Prescott. During his esteemed career, the 29-year-old Englishman became the 4th fastest British 100-metre sprinter ever, a world and European medalist and an Olympic semi-finalist, before retiring last summer. His announcement this week that he will compete in the Enhanced Games in Las Vegas in May, at which taking performance-enhancing drugs is not only permitted, but actively encouraged, has been greeted with the expected criticism, but is yet another blow to everyone who's branded the Enhanced Games an irrelevance. With amongst others Olympic sprint medalist Fred Curley, plus global swimming medalist Ben Proud and James Magnussen on the roster, there's no option left now than to pay attention to it. Prescott, if he can better the world 100-metre record in May, is in line to pick up $1 million. But even without bettering the world's fastest time of 9.58 seconds set by Usain Bolt in 2009, the Enhanced Games event is going to attract headlines. I know that given the calibre of athletes who have now signed up, I'll be watching, and I won't be the only one. But the signing of Prescott, who puts another nail in the coffin of the argument that British sport, and specifically British track and field, is squeaky clean. There's a widespread feeling within many British sports that doping is another country's problem. But it's not. Yes, doping in Britain is not at wager as widespread as it is in, say, Kenya. But it's also criminally naive to believe that British athletes are now somehow immune from cheating. Of course they're not. Prescott may not have proven himself to be a doper with his decision to join the Enhanced Games, but it does show something of a dearth of the morals that are so valued by those who support clean sport. Considerable mud was thrown at the likes of Curley when he put his name down to the Enhanced Games last year, with the argument being that if he's willing to take drugs for this, it suggests he may not have been adverse to doping during his career either. And every bit of criticism and every one of the accusations that were thrown at Curley must also now be thrown at Prescott. The Englishman's involvement in the Enhanced Games does not prove any kind of guilt during his career, but it does suggest an openness to drug taking that so many within British sport are desperate to deny. That article was by Susan Eaglestaff. From the Herald, Monday, the 12th of January 2026. Sports section. Monday's briefing. Man United exit FA Cup, but Arsenal still fighting on 4 fronts. By PA News Agency. Managerless Manchester United's season took another turn for the worse as they were knocked out of the FA Cup by Brighton on Sunday. Arsenal continued to challenge on 4 fronts after they came from behind to beat Portsmouth 4-1 with a Gabriel Martinelli hat-trick, while Scottish Premiership leaders' Hearts claimed the crucial 1-0 win at Dundee. Welbeck adds to former club's woes. United's whirlwind week ended on a low note as Danny Welbeck helped shoot down his former club at Old Trafford. Welbeck was on the score sheet as Brighton won 2-1 in the FA Cup third round, compounding United's woes after manager Ruben Amorim was sacked last Monday. Welbeck added to Brajan Gruda's opener to put the Seagulls on course for a first victory over United in the competition. Benjamin Sesko's header gave United, under the caretaker charge of Darren Fletcher, late hope, but Red Devils teenager Shay Lacey was sent off soon after and Brighton held on. Martinelli grabs hat-trick as Gunners hit back. Gabriel Martinelli hit the headlines for the right reasons, by scoring a treble as Arsenal overcame an early scare to thrash Championship strugglers Pompey 4-1 in their third-round tie. The Premier League leaders fell behind less than 3 minutes into a rain-soaked contest at Fratton Park when Colby Bishop finished from close range. Andre Dozal's own goal quickly levelled the contest before Brazil forward Martinelli struck either side of Noni Maduka's penalty miss. Martinelli, who was widely criticised for attempting to push the injured Conor Bradley off the pitch during Thursday's goalless draw with Liverpool, completed his hat-trick in the 72nd minute. Hammers avoid cup embarrassment. Tati Castellanos scored an extra-time winner as West Ham avoided an embarrassing FA Cup exit by edging past QPR 2-1. The Argentinian was brought in for $26 million from Lazio last week in a bid to salvage the relegation-threatened Hammers' terrible Premier League season. That may yet prove beyond him, but Castellanos did at least take their cup campaign beyond the third round with his first goal for the club. Richard Kone had earlier cancelled out Sarasenko Somerville's opener as Rangers briefly threatened to produce a shock. Leeds also avoided an upset as they came behind to win 3-1 at Derby. Gordon comes off bench to keep Hearts' bid on track. William Hill Premiership leaders Hearts demonstrated their title credentials by overcoming a red card for goalkeeper Alexander Swallow to grind out a 1-0 victory away to Dundee. In front of 4,000 strong travelling support, the Jambos went ahead through Claudio Braga's 27th minute strike. The wind was removed from the visitors' sails when Swallow was sent off in first half stoppage time for fouling Tony Uanga. But Scotland goalkeeper Craig Gordon came on for his first Jambos appearance of the season and helped secure a potentially huge victory by pulling off a stunning stoppage time save from Emile Aqua. What's on today? The FA Cup third round continues as Liverpool host League One Barnsley. The draw for the fourth round also takes place. That article was by PA News Agency.
From Herald Scotland, 12th of January 2026, from the STEM section of the business section. Humility is the wisest starting point as we look to 2026. Article by Graham Roy. Every January brings with it a familiar ritual. Economists publishing confident-sounding predictions about the year ahead for the global economy. Given recent events, a pandemic, an energy shock, surging inflation, and the fastest tightening of monetary policy in a generation, the temptation to predict is stronger than ever. Experience suggests, however, that humility is usually the wiser starting point. Rather than focusing on point forecasts, what matters more is understanding the different forces likely to shape how the global economy evolves, the risks around any forecasts, and how those risks might translate into real-world outcomes. The latest assessments from the IMF and the OECD paint a picture of steady but unspectacular growth. The IMF expects global output growth to slow modestly relative to 2025, reflecting the lagged effects of tighter financial conditions and ongoing structural challenges. The OECD similarly describes an outlook characterised by moderate growth and easing inflation, while warning that momentum remains fragile and uneven. In short, the central scenario is neither one of imminent downturn nor a decisive return to strong growth. Much will depend on whether several risks crystallise. Perhaps the most prominent near-term risk relates to valuations within global stock markets. Enthusiasm around AI has driven sharp increases in equity valuations, particularly among large technology firms. There are increasing concerns, however, that expectations around commercial returns have been overly optimistic. A correction in asset prices would weaken corporate balance sheets, erode confidence, and could transmit more broadly through financial markets. Geopolitical tensions remain a source of global economic risk in 2026. Ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East continue to shape energy markets and supply chains worldwide, while recent events in Venezuela underline how political and economic stresses in one part of the world can propagate through trade, finance, and commodity markets. Added to this are persistent trade tensions and the possibility of fragmentation of the global trading system, an issue the World Trade Organization has repeatedly warned could weigh on long-term growth. A further concern is the growing vulnerability of government balance sheets across the world. High debt levels following the pandemic, combined with the legacy of higher global interest rates, leave some countries exposed to shifts in investor sentiment. A repricing of sovereign risk would push up borrowing costs and lead to tighter fiscal policy and reduced confidence. Against these risks, however, there are reasons for cautious optimism. The global economy has proved remarkably resilient in recent years. Despite severe shocks, labour markets have remained comparatively strong. Corporate balance sheets and stock markets have remained broadly resilient, and global trade flows have adjusted rather than collapsed, reflecting firms' ability to adapt supply chains. That resilience should not be overstated, but it does provide a stronger platform than many anticipated 12 months ago. In much of Europe, price pressures are now easing, and interest rates are expected to stabilise and gradually decline over the coming year. That should help support investment and ease pressure on indebted households and governments alike. Moreover, while fears around AI market values are understandable, the technology offers opportunities on a scale not seen for a generation. Productivity growth has been persistently weak across many advanced economies, particularly in Europe. If AI-driven efficiencies can be diffused beyond a narrow set of firms and sectors, they could help lift output across the economy, something policymakers have been seeking for over a decade. What does all this mean for Scotland and the UK? As open economies, we are deeply integrated into global markets. Developments in global prices, financial conditions and trade therefore matter not as abstractions, but as forces shaping the environment in which firms invest, hire and innovate. That places the emphasis firmly on policy choices and the willingness to pursue reform with a long-term perspective. Strengthening productivity, supporting investment and building resilience to external shocks will require sustained focus on the structural drivers of growth, education and skills, investment in technology, and an economy led by innovation rather than cost competition. International experience suggests that national economies thrive not in isolation but through connectivity. In an era where uncertainty is a permanent feature, confidence in the economy's capacity to adapt will rest less on short-term fixes and more on the strength of these long-term foundations. And that article was written by Graham Roy, who is Professor of Economics at the University of Glasgow's Adam Smith Business School. It was read to you today by me, Bob Lizer. From Herald Scotland, 6th of January 2026, from the STEM section of the business section. Tesla UK car sales drop as China EV maker BYD closes gap on Elon Musk. Article by Ian McConnell. Tesla's UK car sales have fallen sharply, new industry data reveal. The US electric vehicle EV makers' UK registrations in December were down by more than 29% year-on-year at 6,323, according to the data from New Automotive. And, over 2025 as a whole, there was an 8.9% decline. The data highlights the intense competition faced by Tesla, which is led by Elon Musk, from Chinese rivals. UK registrations for China's BYD in December were up nearly five-fold year-on-year at 5,194 units. While BYD has closed the gap significantly with Elon Musk's company in the UK, Tesla remains the UK's best-selling electric car brand. Separate figures published today by the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders show the UK new car market grew for the third consecutive year in 2025, breaching the 2 million mark for the first time since the pandemic, with 2,020,520 new car registrations. Uptake in December rose by 3.9% to 146,249 units, the figures show, with the SMMT flagging a final flourish in the private buyer market, which was up by 16%. SMMT said, repeating a pattern seen in previous years, battery electric vehicle, BEV, registrations took a higher market share in the final months of the year, accounting for 32.2% of the market, the only time the UK government's ZEV mandate target of 28% was exceeded in 2025. As a result, last year's market rose by 3.5%, with growth across all buyer types. Demand from private buyers recovered slightly from 2024, when uptake fell below levels last seen during 2020, with a 4.5% increase to 779,587 units, but still only comprising 38.6% of registrations. Fleet and business registrations also rose, up 2.6% to 1,194,545 and 8.8% to 46,388 respectively. The SMMT added, electrified vehicles narrowly missed becoming the majority of the market, despite a surge during the last quarter. Hybrid electric vehicle, HEV, volumes rose by 7.2% to achieve a 13.9% market share, while plug-in hybrids were the fastest growing powertrain, with volumes increasing 34.7% to take 11.1% of registrations. And that article was written by Ian McConnell.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 13th of January 2025 from the business section. Whisky distillery investigates replacing glass bottles with aluminium. This article is by Craig Williams. One of Scotland's smallest distilleries is working with scientists to find out whether aluminium could replace glass bottles for its Scotch whisky. Stirling Distillery is working with experts from Heriot-Watt University's International Centre for Brewing and Distilling, the ICBD, and its Institute of Chemical Sciences, ICS, on the project, which investigated how whisky behaves when stored in aluminium rather than traditional glass bottles. Catherine Home from Stirling Distillery initiated the project. She said, "We want to make our distillery as sustainable as possible ahead of our first mature whisky being released in 2027. The whisky industry is looking at lots of ways to minimise its footprint. We've already undertaken a range of sustainability measures. Packaging is one of the remaining areas where we can innovate and make an impact. Glass has long been central to whisky's image. It's weighty and evokes the craftsmanship of the spirit. But it is also heavy to transport and relies on high recycling rates to reduce its environmental impact. Aluminium is lighter and widely recycled, so I asked the experts to investigate whether it is a viable alternative. At Heriot-Watt, the researchers combined advanced chemistry with sensory tests to assess whether aluminium interacts chemically with whisky in a way that alters its flavour or, more importantly, raises safety concerns. Spirit supplied by Stirling Distillery was placed in aluminium bottles and tested over several months. Dr. Dave Ellis and his student Charlotte York tested this spirit using nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, a technique that uses a powerful magnet combined with radio frequency waves to identify what a substance is made of by measuring how its atoms respond, and inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry, which detects levels of metals in liquids. Dr. Ellis said, "We know that certain organic acids naturally present in matured whisky can react with aluminium, which can lead to aluminium entering the liquid. If we stir samples with aluminium metal, the levels were well above what would be considered acceptable for drinking water. The chemistry showed that compounds such as gallic acid, which develop during whisky maturation, were reduced or removed after prolonged contact with aluminium. These reactions were much less pronounced in new make spirit, which has not yet developed the same chemical profile. Professor Annie Hill from Heriot-Watt's ICBD said this highlighted why caution was essential. She said any innovation has to respect the craft of whisky making while meeting the highest standards of safety. The aluminium cans we buy pulses and soup in all have liners to protect the contents from metal contamination. In this case, the liner within the can wasn't sufficient to prevent aluminium from passing into the spirit. The next stage of this research would be to find a liner that can withstand high alcohol levels for a prolonged period of time without degrading. Professor Hill oversaw the sensory testing of the whisky stored in aluminium, carried out by her student Andrew Marr. She added, panelists couldn't distinguish between whisky stored in aluminium from whisky stored in glass. So the changes detected in the laboratory didn't translate into differences in aroma. That's great news if we can find an effective liner. Catherine Holmes said the work would be shared with the wider industry, which is under growing pressure to meet Scotland's net zero targets while maintaining strict regulatory standards. Mr. Holmes said, "We're not suggesting glass disappears tomorrow, but offering customers a lower carbon option for a premium product is something worth exploring. As a small distillery, we can help start that conversation." That article was by Craig Williams.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.